Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Central Asian University Podcasts, and I'm honored today to present our special guest, who is the founding dean of Oxford Martin School. He is the former vice president of the World Bank and the professor on globalization at the University of Oxford. Please welcome Ian Goldin.
The reason I think people have become frustrated with globalization is because it spreads risks. Financial crisis was the first big manifestation of what I call the butterfly defect.
What's happening now in Europe and in America? It's kind of a reaction. We've got stretch marks because globalization was happening so quickly.
Yeah, I think it is a reaction, both at the national level, where governments have not looked after people being left behind by globalization.
Coming back to Uzbekistan. So the country is opening up to the world, and we've been doing that for the past around 10 years.
Uzbekistan's done a great job in the reform process. It's now the fastest growing country in the region. I think it will remain so for the next few years. It's one of the fastest growing in the world.
Humanity is developing so rapidly now and going through this AI revolution. Where do you see the positive things in the future?
I'm very optimistic that we'll be having major breakthroughs on health, enabling us to live longer, healthier lives. All of this is improving hugely, very, very rapidly.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Central Asian University Podcasts, and I'm honored today to present our special guest, who is the founding dean of Oxford Martin School and currently the director of Oxford Martin Program on Technology and Economics Change. He is the former vice president of the World Bank and the professor on globalization at the University of Oxford. Please welcome Dr. and Professor Ian Goldin.
It's a great pleasure to be with you and to be at the Central Asian University.
Thank you very much. Welcome. I'm honored actually to have this podcast with you today.
It's a great pleasure.
Ian, we all know that you're a truly global person. I mean, your experience and the way you traveled and your research expertise and the school that you founded at the University of Oxford. And I know that you are interested in the topics of globalization and how it all develops, and you see a lot of challenges. And in the current moment, actually, I think globalization does experience major challenges, especially with this shift to sort of more right-wing policies in Europe. And it's not just individual states, it's actually all over the continent, and not just Europe. Also, if we talk about North America, we see some shifts. What kind of profound effects do you think that's going to have on this globalization movement that we've experienced in the past decades?
So by globalization, I think of flows across national borders, flows of investment, flows of goods, of services, of people and of ideas, and also bad things like pandemics is an aspect of globalization.
Yeah.
So it's brought immense benefits. It's the reason over 1 billion people have escaped poverty. It's the reason why Uzbekistan is developing rapidly. The opening up, the connectivity, the opportunities, the leapfrogging of ideas that comes from that is immensely beneficial. But it's also brought some negative aspects to it. And I think what lies behind this rise in protectionism and nationalism is a rejection of some of the negative aspects of globalization. And there are two particularly that I think people are revolting against. The one is rising spatial inequality. Globalization has been very good for some cities, for some skills, for some places, but not for everyone. And governments have done a pretty bad job at distributing the benefits in the US, in the UK, and in many European countries. So some places, like the coasts in the US, London in the UK, Paris in France, have done incredibly well out of this process. Incomes have risen. They are hubs of the global knowledge economy. But the places that had old jobs that have been lost elsewhere, that aren't competitive in this global knowledge economy, aren't doing so well. And it's more and more difficult to get to where the new jobs are because of the lack of affordability of housing and other restrictions. And the second reason I think people have become frustrated with globalization is because it spreads risks. Notice, financial crisis was the first big manifestation of what I call the butterfly defect of globalization, named after Lorentz, the physicist's observation in the butterfly effect, that when a butterfly flaps its wings over the Amazon, it can cause a tornado over Texas. This defect is not managed. We saw it in the financial crisis. We saw it with COVID-19. People are feeling vulnerable, and they're feeling that connectivity spreads bads, not goods, to them. And so that's also a desire for insularity, for protectionism. I think it's wrong-headed because it leads actually to slower economic growth, less ability to protect because you don't cooperate as much with others, you don't get the skills, you don't get the ideas, the investment, your economy slows down, and the inequalities grow. But I do think it's an understandable reaction. The good news is that globalization is not dead. It's alive and well and living in Asia. And Central Asia will continue to benefit from that. And Uzbekistan, by embracing globalization and free trade, will benefit enormously too.
So do you think it's kind of what's happening now in Europe and in America? It's kind of a reaction. We've got stretch marks because globalization was happening so quickly, especially with the emergence of all these disruptive technologies, which basically make it easier than easy. So you think it's kind of, it has its role?
Yeah, I think it is a reaction. It's mainly a reaction to the failure to manage it. Both at the national level, where governments have not looked after people being left behind by globalization. They're not making it easier for people to move. And so movement within countries is slowing down. Countries are becoming less flexible at a time when they should be becoming more flexible.
Isn't it?
Yeah, because when change happens more quickly, which it is, one needs to be more flexible as a society. You need to be able to move jobs, change skills, upskill, etc. And that's not happening. That's a failure of investment by governments largely to redistribute the benefits. But it's also the case that I think countries that used to be number one now see other countries rising.
Oh, yeah.
And it's and that's a bit of a threat. Psychologically and politically for them. So I think there's a sense that it's done too well. It's allowed other countries to escape poverty, to do well. And now the challenge is to share power globally, not to dominate globally, economically and politically. And I think that's an adjustment process, yes. So my hope is that in the due course of time, we'll have a more even global power balance, resulting from a lot of countries in the world becoming wealthier, not these big ones like India and China, but that adjustment process is not an easy one.
It is definitely not. I can see why, and we can see what's happening. It's a turmoil. It's very difficult to predict what's going to happen. But you mentioned national governments, so they have to do a lot, which clearly they play a role. But if we talk about globalization, these global institutions such as the IMF, World Bank, the UN, and all the other kind of subsidiary organizations, shouldn't we look into reforming those as well? Do you see how they're going to reshape in this new reality?
Yes, absolutely. They're in urgent need of reform. I've been involved in that. I was on Kofi Annan, the Secretary General of the UN's UN Reform Task Force. I was the special representative at the UN. I was involved in many initiatives to change it. And I did a book, Divided Nations, which is about this. So I believe they need urgent reform, but I don't think it's going to happen. And as much as it's clear that the institutions are not fit for 21st century purpose for a whole raft of reasons, we have to always remember that these are shareholder-driven institutions. The shareholders are the governments of the world.
Yeah.
And the biggest governments, most powerful governments, are the dominant shareholders. If the US and China cannot agree how to reform these institutions, they will not reform. And I don't see that happening. European Union is important. Blocks of countries can be important. But the fundamental reason why these institutions are stuck in the past is because their shareholders, that's the big governments,
Stuck in the past.
don't want them to be effective, I think. The US is now pulling out of the World Health Organization. It's stymieing the World Trade Organization. It's undermining the United Nations. But even before that, countries that were opposed geopolitically were the key shareholders in it. The UN Security Council has Russia and the US in it, for example.
Yeah.
You can't change an institution unless it has the mandate, the resources, the leadership for the future. And that's what's not happening. And unfortunately, it's just a reflection of, it can't rise above global politics. The international system is a reflection of international geopolitics. As long as that is gridlocked, the institutions are gridlocked. So yes, absolutely, we need reform. There's also institutions that don't really have a home, like climate change, in an executive sense. But I don't think it's going to happen in the short term. So we have to think about new ways of addressing global problems which work around these institutions.
Oh, around the institutions, so not through the institutions, but
I think increasingly the institutions, the IMF and World Bank are a bit different, but certainly the UN system institutions are very, very tough places to be making global change through at the moment.
I see. And actually, coming back to Uzbekistan, so the country is opening up to the world, and we've been doing that for the past around 10 years. And it's a very difficult time to do that, actually, because geopolitically, we see a lot of, conflicts basically arising all around us. How do you manage being in the position of Uzbekistan, right? How do you manage this growth and develop the potential further? Because we've shown very good figures in terms of economic growth. So how do we sustain those in the long term in this current environment?
Yeah, I think Uzbekistan's done a great job in the reform process. It's now the fastest growing country in the region. I think it will remain so for the next few years. It's one of the fastest growing in the world. So this is a fantastic achievement in a very adverse global economic environment. The rest of the world's global growth has contracted significantly. Uzbekistan's remained more or less the same. It's one of the very few countries in the world, even though it does export a lot to the US, for example, that hasn't really suffered. And that's a credit to the leadership of the country and its entrepreneurial spirit. I think the path towards WTO membership is also a very good thing. WTO might be a bit of a frustrating organization at the moment.
But we want to get there.
But I think it's absolutely rightly so, because it's setting a direction for travel of trade, and it's signaling that you want to be part of a rules-based system. And it's particularly important for smaller countries who are not global powers to be part of a rules-based system. These rules are designed to protect smaller countries from bullying by bigger countries. And it's particularly important, therefore, that we have a rules-based system where everyone's treated fairly, that you're not, those that are the most powerful shout loudest don't get their way. Otherwise, we're back to an old world of sort of power struggle and scramble, where small countries get chewed up in the process. So I think it's very important for Uzbekistan to be signaling its belief, and many countries are, of course. In fact, those that are leaving are the tiny minority. I think most people want these systems to work, but they do need reform. It's also important to recognize that the UN system, the World Trade Organization, this is only one aspect of the story. There are many other bilateral, regional, and business and other organizational structures. So I think finding like-minded countries to work with, companies establishing networks of association, using every tool that one can find to increase one's connectivity, one's role in helping solve problems. Because the other thing that happens to small countries, and Uzbekistan is in an arid part of the world, it's got vulnerabilities on water and on other fronts to climate and other shocks. It's in national interests to work with others to address these. And if one can't always succeed through the UN agencies, I think finding other ways of doing it becomes even more important. So, operate on multiple levels because risk requires greater resilience.
Yeah,
And resilience comes through diversification.
Yeah, so if we kind of partner with the other countries, find other ways to cooperate, this is the way
Absolutely.
forward, right? Also, I can't not ask you this question. It is about technology. I know you're very interested in that respect. We have seen the AI revolution happening. Well, we're actually living through this AI revolution, which generates a lot of fears in people in terms of jobs, in terms of what is knowledge at the moment. Are you supposed to know something, or are you supposed to find out where to find what you need to know? So all these questions are springing about. And being here at Central Asian University, universities are very old institutions, aren't they? University of Oxford was founded in 1270. Yeah, the 1270s. So it's a very old institution. And it had survived through a lot of differences, economic crisis, wars, population crisis, many, many different things. So how do you see universities actually coping with this AI revolution? And do you see what the future of higher education in particular is in this environment?
Well, it's definitely a revolution. I think we're seeing advances in generative AI, which are quite extraordinary in the capacity not only to provide answers to questions, but to sort of set out a thinking process, which is increasingly like humans, exploring one avenue, retreating, exploring another avenue, which is only going to accelerate, and of course then become self-reinforcing, where machines help machines get better. And that's where we very rapidly are heading. So I think it does raise a big question of what's the purpose of universities, what do students learn, how do they do better than machines? And it's going to put a lot of pressure on students to be more creative. What the machines are not good at is telling fact from fiction, real data from fake data, discerning the weight of evidence is often not something the machines are yet good at. I don't think they will be for a while. Machines don't tend to have an ethical foundation. So judgment calls about what's right and wrong, under what circumstances, for who, those sorts of questions become very important. I think there's many areas of work that require empathy and understanding. And I'm much rather being interviewed by you than by a machine.
We are real, by the way, so that you know.
Exactly. I don't think a humanoid robot would do such a good job, and I don't think the listeners would. I mean, it would be a novelty.
Yeah.
But aside from the novelty value, I don't think it will be as interactive for quite a long time, because the signaling that comes out of human contact is different, and the relationships that are built. So we need to specialize in areas that we're good at as humans, and understand what they are. Of course, will change because the machines are getting better and better and will learn from us. But there's still quite a lot of space. I think over the medium term, my research group in Oxford thinks that about 40% around there of jobs are going to be lost to machine intelligence over the next 20 years or so. So the question for those that are in vulnerable jobs is, what can they do that's different? Will the new jobs be in the same places as the old jobs? So geography is extremely important. Can you get to where the new jobs are? Or is there some impediment in terms of affordability of housing, dependent elderly or partners or whatever? And how will those then evolve? So the speed of change is accelerating. The one absolute certainty is we need to be prepared to keep learning. And keep adapting.
Lifelong learning is
going to become, and life's going to get longer as well.
Yeah.
So that need, the curiosity, the desire, the interest in learning wanting to learn. That's the most important thing that universities need to teach.
I'll tell you a little personal story. When I was a teenager, I had an idea that at some point we'll have robots doing everything, right? And maybe that's a socialist idea that I had, but in any case. And I thought, so people will have a lot of free time. And there will be, I didn't call it back then the term that is used now, but there will be the universal income, not universal basic income, but universal income, because robots are going to produce all the goods, do all those things. We can share the generated wealth. And then, I don't know, get preoccupied with our creativity, with our talent, and enjoy life. But actually looking at what's happening at the moment with this AI, so there are multi-billion companies and startups that become millionaires within minutes, basically. So it doesn't seem to me that this equality is actually there, that this technology actually now generates even more inequality than before. So which way are we going to go?
No, I think it is increasing inequality. The way that and you see this in the stock exchange, where a small number of tech companies are dominating an increasing share of the stock exchanges, private equity investment, traded as well. You see it in salaries of what people are getting paid in tech, and how it's distancing itself from other jobs. So the skills are becoming scarce, and they're more. So it's definitely furthering inequality. It's also furthering geographical inequality, because the new jobs are in dynamic cities where young people want to be, not in the old left behind places.
Yeah.
So that's at the heart of the political fragmentation. I don't believe in UBI, universal basic income, as an answer for a number of reasons. One is it's just the arithmetic. I'm an economist. The arithmetic just doesn't work. Assuming that you're going to have 60% or 70% of your population unemployed, and you're going to pay them all a decent wage to be unemployed, there's just not enough money. It would be more than the total budget of the economy before you start speaking about health expenditures or education expenditures or any other. So the arithmetic doesn't work unless you pay people very little, in which case they're in poverty.
Yeah.
So that's the first objection, is it's sort of a fantasy arithmetically. The second is that I believe people get meaning, networks, self-worth, skills, out of work. I think we work not just because we have to, but I think it gives us a lot of
sense of purpose.
Sense of purpose in life. And I worry a lot about societies based on handouts. There's a lot of evidence that communities that depend on handouts, not help-ups, but handouts, are sicker communities, sick mentally, physically, higher divorce rates, drug addiction, other addiction, crime, etc. What Angus Deaton, the Nobel Prize economist, calls the diseases of despair. And so I worry about the impact on people and communities of welfare, basically. The third reason I don't like it is that the UBI, which is what people think has to happen because everyone needs to get it to make it politically acceptable, leads to people actually who are poor getting less money, because everyone now is getting the benefit rather than just the unemployed or something. And also, I think it's ethically wrong. I don't think we should be giving money to billionaires or to everyone. I think we should only give money to people that really need it. So there's
it's difficult to determine, actually.
And the fourth reason I don't like it is I think it and there's a funny coalition of trade unionists and others on the left that push for it, and sort of libertarian Silicon Valley people that push for it. I think it postpones and displaces a more fundamental discussion, which is what is the future of work and what happens in a society. And there's all sorts of other solutions, like shorter working day weeks, higher tax and redistribution, that more mentoring and other roles that are paying for work that's not currently paid for, like elderly care work by families or childcare work, for example. Paying musicians and other creatives that I think will still have to work in a machine age. paying them more.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of other conversations one should have about a world where AI does a lot of jobs that are not happening because people are saying we'll just give them UBI. And that's the fourth reason I'm not keen on it.
Hmm. But when you mentioned about age, aging population, right? There are there are two groups of countries, three groups of countries, right? Once they have aging population and they are in crisis. So we're talking about Japan, for example, South Korea is getting there, etc. We're talking about countries with sustainable population and the very young countries. So if we focus on countries with aging population, their labor force is diminishing year by year, becomes less and less. So they will probably be interested into digitalizing everything and AIing everything.
Absolutely.
While countries which have population growth and they have this population pyramid as a pyramid, they might have a problem of creating those new tech jobs.
Absolutely.
And then fall behind in terms of development because simply they have to keep their youth busy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things to say about this, but you're absolutely right. Firstly, it's no accident that Japan's always been was in the 60s and 70s at the forefront of technology and automation because they were the first people to go through this demographic transition. So they got short of people long before the rest of the world did. And therefore, the replacement of people with vending machines, for example, was something that came first in Japan. But it's over half the countries of the world now have populations which are below replacement, and some labor forces are contracting rapidly. China, for example, has 4 million less workers this year than it had last year. So countries we have, and Europe is contracting rapidly. Countries where you have contracting populations, AI could be fantastic because it's going to do the work that people did and help you get through this demographic transition. Although a lot of what you need, like elderly care work, massages, cannot be done by machines, not for a while anyway.
Yeah.
Then you have countries like Uzbekistan that still have a growing youth population, but are reasonably far down the development path. And you could imagine this transitioning very effectively to a knowledge economy, these young people getting jobs, and that's sustainable. My biggest worry is for Africa, because every country that's developed historically has done so on the basis of a development ladder where people do repetitive jobs in services, in manufacturing, and so on. That's how Asia developed. That's extremely important. Africa has 25 million more workers coming into the workforce every year because its median age is 20.
Wow.
And the problem for Africa is that the development ladder, like the past, no longer exists. Services, call centers, all of that, what developed Bangalore and places with moving piece of paper, that doesn't exist and won't exist in the future. So forget about repetitive services and forget about manufacturing production lines, because that's going to be a dance of the robots and is already the dance of the robots. And so the question is where the jobs at scale are going to come from. And that's before you talk about geopolitics, the impact of climate change on Africa, and everything else. So what you think about AI and jobs depends totally on where you stand. And I believe that in the countries with declining demographics, declining workforces, this could be a very positive thing, particularly if they had higher levels of income. For countries that are at low levels of income, like the African countries, with rapidly expanding workforces, this is a massive worry.
Yeah, but how then, if we're talking about youth and employment, now, for example, in the United States, we know that Donald Trump now announces bringing back the old industries, right? So car manufacturing, production, etc., which it's great for the economy, I'm sure, but it's a bit dated. And then if we talk about these countries with massive youth who are eager to work, they want to do something, but there is no, as you said, there is no ladder, there is no historical background of doing that. So how can we create these opportunities for them, especially in those countries which are suffering from youth unemployment? How can governments create those opportunities without having the technology in the first place?
Yeah.
So
well, it's a massive chance. Firstly, on the US, I think it's a complete fantasy that you can recreate jobs from the 1990s. No one produces cars or anything in the way they were produced in the 1990s anymore.
It's all robots.
It's all robots.
It's all replaced
It's
by
capital replacing labor. And to the extent you need labor, it's more skilled labor. Not only is it different production processes, which is much more capital intensive than unskilled labor intensive or semi-skilled labor intensive, but it's also in different places. To the extent that you will, say, bring car back manufacturing, it won't be in the same town that the cars were built in the 1950s or 60s or 70s or 80s. It'll be in a different place that are offering tax breaks, often in the south of the US. So it's different, and it takes a long time. It takes 3 or 4 or 5 years to build these factories, if you can find the capital and the land and everything else. So it's a long process. Then you start stopping the skilled migrants coming, and you don't have the skilled technicians. You need to build the factories and to man them. So that's on that. I think the idea of recreating the past is maybe politically a good soundbite, but it's not going to happen in reality. I think your point about what is the path for countries that have this rapidly expanding workforce at low levels of income is the most difficult question. It's not clear. There's a number of solutions which are necessary. One is scale. Very few low-income countries have GDPs or economies which can create a domestic market. So the integration, trade reform, reducing trade barriers becomes more and more important the poorer you are. And by the way, there's a tension with this new fashion for industrial policy to protect infant industries, which I think can be very counterproductive. You make things more expensive for consumers, and you don't have the scale to produce domestically. So one is scale, and that comes through trade integration, trade reform. Another is finding capital, depth. That comes from having a predictable, business-friendly environment. That doesn't exist everywhere, but that becomes more and more important the more you want to do it. And there's all sorts of other things that happens when you go into AI and automation. You need reliable power. You need skilled people. And so those details become very, very important. Can you get the skilled workforce? Do you have 24-hour power sources, etc.?
And this is the problem that actually worries me. So some of the countries, although they might have talent and they might have kind of capacity of building something, they might not have the infrastructure, like as you mentioned about power. So like China, the United States, Russia, Europe, they're building this new kind of basically power factories to power the AI machines, servers, etc., while others might not actually have that opportunity.
I mean, I think there's quite a lot of evidence that this is this concentration effect. As a result of this need for all these different things to make AI happen, you need a lot of skilled people. Skilled people go to where they want to go.
Yeah.
That's why they go to dynamic cities. Yeah. They're not going to go to some small town in the middle of nowhere or some country where they can't walk around at night and go to restaurants and nightclubs and everything else. So, there's concentration. There are too many parts. There's capital and cheap capital. There's spare parts. There's all these things that you need to come together, and they don't come together in that many places. And they can't come together in that many places because there's such a shortage of skilled people in the world at the top end of AI programming and so on. So I think that we'll see concentration factor, and that goes back to the inequality point, goes back to the politics, and I think it's very difficult for...
So the great divide is just going to be wider.
I fear so.
In that respect.
Countries can do a lot, and Uzbekistan certainly can do a lot. I don't see it in the same category because it's slightly wealthier, it's much better placed than many others. But when I'm thinking about the future of Africa, it's difficult to think of the scenarios that AI firms would go to Africa.
Yeah. Well, at the moment, at least.
At the moment.
Might be.
Exactly.
Another thing, I know it's your area of expertise, but another thing along the same path of the conversation is that if we have this extensive workforce, it's migration of migrant labor. But now what we observe in the world is that what surprises me, some countries rely on foreign labor. So they have aging populations, they don't have enough workforce, so they need foreign labor. Yet when you read the news, watch their media, and so on, they are a little bit anti-migration, so the rules are stricter, etc.
Yeah.
Of course, we talk about legal migration. We don't talk about illegal things, but yet the kind of the approach to migration, how these people are treated in those countries of their destination, seems to be a bit counterintuitive to me, because the labor is needed and should be used, but why are people treated not the same? So
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and that's why I've been writing books about this and talking a lot about it. We, particularly aging societies, are going to need more labor. The jobs they need cannot be done remotely. You can't look after an elderly person remotely. You cannot give a massage remotely or work in a kitchen remotely. What we need as societies get relatively wealthy societies get older is more people. We also need more people to address some of our biggest challenges. Build more affordable housing. Reduce our waiting lists in our national health services. This is not going to be done by local people. Pick our strawberries, whatever. We need people. And you restrict, and as a university professor, we also need foreign staff, faculty, and students. Foreign students are cross-subsidizing British students, for example. They're paying higher fees. And that's good for British students. But we want the foreign faculty, who are the best in the world, to come and work there. So restricting people will reduce our competitiveness, it'll reduce our productivity, it'll increase the costs. It's very bad for growth. We know that. Migrants are also more dynamic. They're double as likely to start a small business, to win a Nobel Prize, etc., because they are exceptional people.
They're very brave. They are exceptional people.
They're risk takers. They're innovators. And they see things differently to local people, which makes them disruptors in a positive sense of innovation. They see opportunity where others will not always see the opportunity. So we know that, and we also like the diversity they bring. And it's interesting that the places that are most foreign and diverse are the most tolerant of immigrants. So in the UK, for example, London is 40% foreign-born. It's the most pro-migration city in the UK. The places that are anti-migration have 5% migrants. It's the same true in Europe. The countries that are the most anti-migration, Poland and Hungary, have the lowest share of migrants in their society. The countries globally that have the highest share are the pro. So the countries that have the highest share are the Gulf countries, like Dubai, the Emirates. They have 90% of their population is immigrant. They wouldn't exist as we know them today.
Exactly.
With the immigrants that have built everything. They built the factories, they built the shopping mall, they built infrastructure. It's migrant. It's a story of migrants there, which the Emirati, in this case, are managing very effectively. So there's no relationship between the number you have and how you feel about them. In fact, the opposite is the case. And the society that's become very anti-immigrant, the US, is, of course, built on immigrants. Trump's grandfather was German. It's so there's an irony in all of this. And I see it as a reflection, this rising anti-immigrant as a reflection of two things mainly. The one is a feeling of pressure on resources. Everything's crowded. The lines are getting longer at the hospitals and the buses and the transport, and the job market is tough, not because of immigrants, but because of AI, if you've got old skills. And so people are, I think, feeling anxious, and they're feeling anxious about things that come from elsewhere. Financial crisis, COVID-19, pandemics and foreigners have been associated for a long time. The word quarantine comes from the Italian word quarente, which was instigated by the Italians to stop foreigners coming to with the plague for 40 days, because they recognized that foreigners brought the plague to Venice. So this association of foreign with plague, psychologically and to some extent practically, is not a new one, but it became, I think, accelerated by this. The decline in public investment in housing, in hospitals, in transport, the contraction of the state privatization has, I think, had some of this impact that people feel they cannot, like, need it. Poor people, that they cannot afford the services. There's too many people queuing for them. The solution isn't, and then there's this big conflation of refugees and migrants. Now, refugees are a different legal category.
Yeah.
It's people that are in legitimate fear of their lives and persecution. It's different to economic migrants and students and so on, who come on a voluntary basis. But they're mixed up in people's minds.
Mixed up, exactly.
And so when people see the small boats arriving in the Mediterranean or in the Channel, English Channel, they're thinking migrants. But these people are basically refugees, the majority of them, overwhelming majority of refugees. And I think governments have done a very bad job of saying, this is our legal responsibility under international law. It's a burden sharing across Europe and across the world. Do we want these people to die in the Mediterranean or in their home countries, or are we prepared to share the burden? If so, how much? And that's a proper discussion that needs to happen. And then there's the economic discussion, the student discussion. How many would be good for our country? And my own view is that we need to keep those separate. And on the economic discussion, my own view is that we should have more, but we need more control. And this is what I think the Gulf has got so right, is that people come and people go. Now, I think people should have a pathway to staying, but everyone needs to be documented. Everyone needs to follow the rules of the country. And the citizens of the country need to feel that government's in control. And I think that's possible. But it needs to be done on the front foot, not in a defensive way.
But you're right about the Gulf countries. Yeah, their picture is completely different to the rest of the world. But I wonder why most of the countries, like European countries and many Asian countries, I'm sure in America it's the same, governments are not doing a very good job of integrating those people who arrive, whether temporarily or like permanently, into society. So you get these little conclaves, congregations of different languages, different cultures, different religions, etc. But I think something can be done about it, right? And it's not that difficult to...
Yeah, I'm not sure it's necessarily... Firstly, I think we need to respect diversity.
Yeah.
And often it's a strength. You know, one of the reasons people love London is because it has these different districts. You can have real Chinese food, or real Indian food, real Korean food in different districts. The same with San Francisco and New York. This has always been the case, and is not necessarily a weakness. As long as people are abiding by your laws, but they're paying your taxes, they're not, they've only got one wife, whatever. I think it doesn't have to be a threat to you. It can be a source of strength to your society. The separate question is, if you give people permanent residence or a path to citizenship, should they speak the language of the country? I happen to feel they should, but that's not coming to pick strawberries or coming to give massages or something. That's like a separate question. And it's like, who do we want to give citizenship to? And then what are the hurdles to become a citizen? Some countries will be national service. Language is certainly part of that.
But that's
I think it's a separate question.
But I mean, in terms of, as you mentioned, London is very diverse. And when people come to London, basically although you are a foreigner, you don't feel foreign. You're welcomed. They know you're different. They embrace diversity, etc. While in less diverse places, you're being looked at, So, I mean, in terms of integration, I mean, not just like through the language and so on, but mutual understanding that these are also people, they're normal people. You don't have to look at them, with a kind of suspicions and all of this. Because I think a lot more can be done by the state.
Definitely.
To do that.
I think a lot more can be done, not only by the state, but by employers. To help people. It's very tough when you arrive in a country often to find property, to get your kids into school or whatever, if you have kids. I think a lot can be done, both positively to improve things, to send signals to society that, this is normal, it's fine, it's okay, but also to scare society. The British Prime Minister recently made a speech saying this has become an island of strangers. He then apologized for the speech and said he hadn't read it carefully before, which is rather strange. But that doesn't help. You know, when people at the top are reinforcing worries and concerns rather than addressing them and saying, okay, this is an issue sometimes, let's address it in this way. And of course, it's also important that migrants follow the law. You know, I think every country has the right to expel people that don't, or jail them, whatever, that don't follow the criminal justice system of the country.
That applies to citizens as well.
It applies, but it raises a question about documentation. And my own view is that we should document people in our society.
Yeah, obviously everything should go through the legal. Because in a way, actually, all of us are migrants, immigrants, whatever you call it. Because the globe.
Not least in this region.
Well, some people say like, oh, we've always lived. But, you know.
And before that?
Exactly. And before that, what happened?
Where do you come from?
So,
in the book, I have a lot of maps on this, including on this region. And you see this movement. I mean, and now it's one of the great things that's happening with AI and DNA sequencing and genomics is that now we really have much better idea of where we came from and when.
Some people it's a surprise.
And everyone comes from Africa is the bottom line. You know, we're all Africans. It's just a question of when and then there's a lot of mixing in this region with Denisovans, with Neanderthals in Europe, a lot of that. So we have gene traces from other species as well. And that accounts for many things, like the ability to live at altitude, for example, which already comes from the Denisovans.
And this diversity is great. I mean, you've experienced it here in Uzbekistan, right? I told you about cacophony of languages that speak like at least 2 or 3 languages.
Huge strength.
It's a great thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
If we talk about migration flows, right? In terms of global economies, so global institutions do need some sort of a reform, and there should be better integration. And can the countries that have excessive labor force help the countries that basically are lacking labor force? And can we actually, through documentation, through policy, through travel, can we do it sort of so that we help each other out, but don't see each other as not adversaries, but as strangers, as you mentioned?
I think that will happen. I think it should happen. But I think it's going to be a while before it happens. The best experiment we have is European Union. Now, 29 countries in the Schengen area of Europe, free movement of people. And for economists, this is great because you can see what happens. For example, when there was the Euro crisis and you had 70-80% unemployment in some southern European places, in Portugal, in Spain, and so on, people didn't move. They stayed at home. Even though there were very big income differences between them and, say, what people were getting in Scandinavia, where they could go. So we know that you can take away borders and people don't move. We know that you can have these big differences, but there's still a big anxiety, particularly around the hard shell around Europe, the outer border of Europe. And the UK, we see this strongly. In the US, we see it strongly. I think we'll be moving to a world where we recognize we've got shortages of labor. AI will do many things, but it won't do many of the things we want, like people looking after our elderly parents, like giving us a massage, etc. And we'll want people, and we'll have a choice to face. Either we're going to pay much more, or we can have to wait a long time to get it. I mean, it's very difficult, for example, in the UK now to get an elderly care worker. So and this is
not just in the UK.
This is across the political spectrum. People who are anti-immigrant are recognizing that they can't get someone to look after their parents. And so I think attitudes will change. And we also see this in the Russia's invasion of Ukraine has led to something like 5 million Ukrainians being refugees across Europe. No one cares very much because they look like us. They often share our religion, etc. And so there might be we'll accept more people from there, but not from there. But where people come from that look the same is also going through the same demographic change. as us. So there's not going to be many more.
Yeah.
And I think we will have to accept more people, but it's going to be a slow cultural shift. And I predict that by 2050, we'll have a very different view on migration. We will be looking for people. And this happened in the 19th century.
Yeah.
Governments were recruiting people.
Yeah.
The mass movement, they were paying for people's travel. They were doing all sorts of things to try and compete, to grow. And I think we're going to be heading back to that at the second half of the century.
Well, you mentioned that people in Europe, Southern Europe, they didn't want to go because of different reasons, right? Housing prices.
They want to stay with their
family, culture, language.
And when you're in trouble, like unemployed, you want to stay with your family that's going to support you. You want to stay with your friends. You want to stay with your loved ones. Often you have kids. I mean, you don't want to. It's very difficult to move.
So in the future, probably we'll have to promote migration and immigration.
I think in the second half of the century, we will be in a very different situation.
Because in the United States, actually, as internal travel
is low.
It's
lower than it was, much lower than it was 50 years ago.
Which is a very strange phenomenon, right? We're so much better connected, but actually this should be, and it might be partly because all these media sources, they tell you stay home.
Well, I think the main reason why internal travel within countries, and this is not true only of the US, it's true of the UK, true of France, true of many countries, is that people can't afford the housing in the places which are dynamic. So, you can't afford to go to where the jobs are because the prices are so high for the property. You used to be commuting. You'd drive over a long distance or you'd stay in outer suburbs. But that's become harder and harder, more and more expensive, and it takes longer and longer because of congestion and lack of investment in public transport. So we're finding that people are less flexible, less able to move between cities, and that I think is also something that has to be addressed. You might find within countries that you have very high employment, as it happens now in some places, and high unemployment in other places, and that has to be addressed through housing markets and transport systems.
Ian, to conclude, just my final question. With all these challenges that we're facing now, obviously humanity is developing so rapidly now and going through this AI revolution. What are the prospects? Where do you see the positive things in the future? What is going to rise out of it?
I'm very optimistic that we'll be having major breakthroughs on health, enabling us to live longer, healthier lives. First, it's already happening with physical longevity, management of diabetes, of heart attacks, cancers. All of this is improving hugely, very, very rapidly. And I think the next big breakthrough is going to be on neurodegenerative mental decay, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, and then also a recognition and more frank conversations and treatments for mental health illnesses, which has often been hidden. So this is a fantastic area for potential improvement. I think there's a massive transition on energy. I think we're moving to a world of clean energy, clean for our air, clean for the atmosphere, at low cost with renewables. I mean, it's just remarkable, the decline in costs of renewables. Plenty of sunlight in Uzbekistan. So I think that's going to be amazing when you're in a world of very cheap, clean energy. I'm optimistic about that, and we're seeing that going into vehicles, electric vehicles, and grid systems, etc. What's happening in generative AI is extraordinary. It will only accelerate. It'll lead to, I think, breakthroughs in some of the most difficult questions that we face, not least on medicine, but also in other areas. So we should see much more potential for unleashing human capability, augmented by AI. Lots of risks, but I'm hoping that augmented by AI, we're going to also find the ideas to manage these risks. And the most difficult thing, which is not evolving, is the politics at the global level, the geopolitics and national politics. How do we get that to go into the 21st century? Perhaps AI will have the answer.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your insights. It was a pleasure to be here with you.
It's been a huge pleasure chatting with you.
Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much.